and gentlemen, everyone around and in between, it is DebateSensei NPDA edition, where we talk about things relevant to competitive debates for the National Parliamentary Debate Association at the college level. I have with me Kyle Pryor-Landman of SDSU fame. Thank you, Kyle.
Thanks, Jared.
Excellent. I'm Jared Kubicka-Miller. I'm a professor of communications, a debate coach. And our first episode of the second season is going to focus on a lot of changes that have been coming. Now, I was not able to attend one of the recent conferences where a lot of the changes were proposed and voted on, but I saw them in my inbox. And so I'm really glad to be able to talk about some of the things that were proposed and, from what I understand, passed at these. Okay. All right. So the place I'm talking about is PSCFA. That's the Pacific Southwest Collegiate Forensics Association. That's just a region in the United States. But I definitely want to talk about that, and as well as like what's happening nationally. And let's start with you. You have a role on NPDA now. That's new, yes?
I am the executive secretary of the NPDA now.
Okay.
Somehow, some way, the people voted me in.
What does the executive secretary do?
So my job mainly is to count sweepstakes points and respond to emails. So I'm essentially the, tab guy.
Okay.
I am also the person who made the new website for NPDA. So if you have been missing an NPDA website, if you go to npdadebate.com, I made it. So yeah, that's something we've been sorely lacking for a while. Trying to put a bunch of resources on there for people. Right now it's pretty bare bones, but it's got the flexibility to be something better.
Okay. I'm going to make a quick little banner for that one too. I saw that recently when I was going through, kind of doing a little research for this episode. I'm like, oh, this looks new. So it's really nice. And so I still have to. Oh, and you have a calendar, huh? Very nice.
Yep. Yeah, we have a tournament calendar now. Again, I have to fill it all out manually. If you submit your tournament for sanctioning, I will put it on the calendar. So
okay,
that's how it goes.
and so, what does a tournament need in order to be sanctioned?
So you need at least 6 NPDA eligible schools competing.
Okay.
And the tournament director needs to take Title IX training.
Okay.
And then you have to send me your results. And then that's it. Then you get sanctioning. So you're an official NPDA tournament that counts for sweepstakes points. It counts for all the awards that we give out at nationals.
Okay. Is there other leadership changes that we ought to know about?
The president is now Adasia Powell from Mercer University, my old debate coach. Actually, 3/4 of the 3/4 of the board have all coached me, which is pretty funny, or is me. Adasia Powell from Mercer University, Fikar Tesfaye from Mercer University, who also coached me, and then the treasurer is Shannon LeBeau from Rice University.
Okay. And I'm assuming y'all have met and talked about the direction you want to go in. And anything. Is there anything that is sort of free to share as far as like what the direction that or some major goals or focus that this group is going to have this season?
So interestingly enough, one of Adasia's major priorities was kind of growing NPDA, right? Obviously, we're hitting an all-time low. Things are looking bleak. So they gave us a outreach committee, which I'm like ex officio member of, but it is myself, Brent Nicholson from McKendree, Kiefer Storer from Whitman, and Conrad Hack from Concordia Irvine.
Okay.
And our job over the last, and we've been meeting pretty regularly for the last 6 months, is to try to identify why people left and how can we get them back. And one of the major things that we've discovered is that SoCal is a major driver behind why NPDA has shrunk so much.
Really?
A lot of the universities, former DOFs, former executive committee members, and former like top of the sweepstakes charts people are all from California broadly, but Southern California most significantly.
Okay.
Similarly, a similar number of people from the Midwest broadly, but California as an entity has driven a lot of the decline in participation at least the national tournament level. So we've pretty much identified that, SoCal is the region we need to focus on in order to get Parley debate back to where it was. And similarly, right, like we're also working on some structural changes that will be introduced at the fall business meeting.
Okay.
Including better accessibility for novices, right?
Okay.
So things like instituting a novice round robin rather than the previous implementation of novices, where we just kind of threw them into the open pool and then gave them a breakout round at the end, which is terrifying for novices. Especially with the way power matching works. Now you get a 1, 2, 3 seed team hitting a bottom 45, 46, 47 team.
Right. Okay. So making it more accessible for novices is one thing that we're going for. I mean, has there been just a general decline in like the number of squads that just exist, or are they transitioning to like other forms of debate?
Somewhat of both we've identified. One of the interesting things is IPDA nationals had the same number of competitors, but a higher number of squads just because it's individual.
Okay.
Right. So it looks like it has more people, but more people, or the same amount of people are going to IPDA solo nationals as NPDA solo nationals. One of the major draws away from national participation is scheduling.
Right.
NPDA conflicts usually with IFA, the International Forensic Association tournament. And like, unfortunately, it's just a fact of life that South Korea is cooler than Lebanon, Illinois. It's a much easier draw to get, students to want to say, hey, I'm going to go take a week off of my life to go to South Korea versus I'm going to go take a week off my life to go to Illinois. And also, directors of programs have to choose financially, where are we going to spend our money?
Right.
How are we going to get to all of these tournaments? And does it make more sense to go to one tournament that offers all of the things versus one tournament that offers one of the things for a handful of students?
So you were talking about the fall business meeting. When is that?
It is the Wednesday of NCA, so that would be...
That's November, right?
Yeah, that would be November 20th is what it's scheduled for.
Okay.
We still haven't heard back from some of the people at NCA.
Okay.
But that is the tentative date.
All right, and you said that there's going to be some structural changes proposed there.
Yes.
All right. Like any way we can get an advanced copy of what's going on? I mean, at the very least, it would let people kind of think about it up until...
Yes. I have the bylaw proposals.
Okay.
Let me see here. Correct.
Well, while you're doing that, I do remember that PSCFA had a number of changes that were proposed. And so we can. I did want to talk about that. That might make a little bit more sense, and then like discuss how that might affect nationally. So, if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, but group prep no longer a thing for, at least for PSCFA tournaments. All right, so we're talking about maybe about 4 tournaments in the Pacific Southwest of the country. So there's no group prep, and flex time is gone as well, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's start with flex time actually.
Sure.
So what's the motivation behind that change?
So a little bit of a backstory as to why this kind of happened.
Okay.
I feel semi-personally responsible to try to help NPDA grow in SoCal, right? This is where I live. This is where I work. This is where I plan on staying for at least the next couple of years. So I want to see the debate format that I love flourish. So I hosted a panel at the coaches conference on the state of debate in the Pacific Southwest, right? We've identified nationally that this is a region of interest. And so I was, my God-given mission to try to solve some of the problems. I sat down in a room with probably 7 or 8 directors from across SoCal and discussed what is keeping them from participating. Why are the entries in IPDA triple, quadruple what they are in Parley?
Right.
Why is Team IPDA starting to be a thing that we're discussing in SoCal? Why, what are the major structural issues that we can change at an organizational level to help you feel more comfortable bringing more teams in Parley? And most of them identified, and again, this is something that we're discussing at the national level as maybe maybes, is how do we level the playing field, right? We've noticed that so at least for flex time, I guess we can start with flex time and then we can prep, because I think that's a much more nuanced discussion. But I think flex time creates a lot of dead space. And that for the sake of time and for the sake of trying to add a little bit more strategic flexibility, bringing back points or like incentivizing points of information rather than sitting there for 2 minutes prepping, might add a little bit more strategic flexibility into creating more of an extemporaneous format of debate rather than trying to be policy light.
Right.
And not that there's anything wrong with policy.
Right.
But Parley debate was not supposed to be policy light. And so by straying away from flex time, we can try to avoid some of the issues that created NPDA to be policy light in the first place.
Yeah, I missed the entire flex time sort of era. And so it was always points of information. And those, were definitely strategies that we liked implementing, right? As well as not just what you asked, but like how many times you're kind of pressuring them to answer a question and how you handle that and manage it like in real time was something that, and I know, and like as a coach, I'm like, well, I guess that knowledge is completely irrelevant now. You know what I mean? It's like there's no reason to teach anybody that, and so now I have to recall all that stuff and kind of hand off those strategy things. I can remember people being coached to like hold their powdered wig when they stand up and stuff in order to which is ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. Okay, so flex time. Let's talk about what the motivation was behind getting rid of group prep in Pacific Southwest.
So I think the PSCFA, the major concern was San Diego State and Concordia. Because we are the only 2 schools now that go to nationals. And so we're the only 2 schools with the impetus to prep nationally. Meaning that, right, like I have years of back files from various different institutions and my own when I debated and my coaches, and we have an argument for everything, right? We have a file for, right, and I'm sure so does Concordia, right? We all have files that, generic AFs, generic disads, critiques that I can just pull out of my Google Drive and give to my students, right? Other schools don't have that luxury. Smaller schools don't have that luxury. And they also have to prep significantly more students, which means that the coaches coaching time per student is one, a lot less, but also the strategic flexibility of these schools is also a lot less, right? Like I can dictate an econ disad to 2 students a lot easier than it is to dictate an econ disad to 12 students.
Right.
And so the prevailing belief at that point was that prep rooms like mine are dangerous to the strategic flexibility of other schools,
Okay.
which I can see.
Yeah.
One of the arguments, I guess, against that is that the back files still exist regardless, and the students can still access them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm not going to say, unless it's a rule, that you can't access the back files that I've curated for the last decade.
Right.
You know, and so I don't really know if this solves the problem. I mean, it's worth trying to see. It's worth, you know, the entries are going down. And so it's worth seeing if the entries go up. Is it going to necessarily change the problem? I don't know.
Right. Because I mean, I did plenty of group prep, but when I started Parley, generally it was no group prep, and so even really good teams eventually would just run into a topic that they were stumped on. Of course, the difference now being like, you know, there's AI now when there wasn't beforehand. It's like we weren't even using the internet. All right, it was just basically like, what can you remember? And so those I'm wondering how that's going to change things, because I do kind of get that there's a little bit of like it's not the debaters, it's the coaches that are debating each other a little bit. You know what I mean? It's like they're trying to beat these arguments that they've been hitting for so many years in grad school now that they're done with their competitive eligibility. But well, it's worth seeing. And so it'll be a little nostalgic, but we're gonna have to. So do you have a sort of, are you collecting data on this somehow, or I mean, even anecdotally, or like surveys and things like that? Yeah.
So I'm not like formally collecting data, right? I mean, there's no like survey I'm giving out. I've got a research proposal to write that's separate. I need to get out of grad school is what needs to happen. But I mean, I am collecting it anecdotally. So I'm tournament directing at the warm up. And one of the things I'm very interested in seeing at the warm up is how do novices handle the new rules? Right. Because they don't know any better at this point. Right. So what do the novices do with this? What are the ballots looking like? Who is winning changing? Right. And I know the warm up is not like the world's best place to determine that. But I think at all of the PSCFA tournaments, right, I mean, I can ask Tab very nicely to give me the information, and they will. But, you know, what are the kind of trends happening post-rule change? Are these things beneficial? Are more people showing up? If more people aren't showing up and more people aren't bringing squads, maybe we just go back to the way things were. Okay. You know, I don't think that these rule changes were necessarily meant to be set in stone or permanent. And that's not how they were discussed. But the major issue was that we're trying to stop the bleed. Because the alternative is just not where we want it to be.
Okay. Let's talk about how this goes nationally now, right? Sure. Like, because that was the first thought I had. I'm like, okay, flex time is an NPDA rule, not just a PSCFA rule. And so I'm like, how does that work with each other? So I'm wondering if this business meeting that's coming up might reconcile that. What's going on?
So the beautiful thing about the NPDA bylaws is that they don't preclude regional variations in sanctioning. So technically you can have, as long as you have a 2-on-2 extemporaneous debate format, you can pretty much be sanctioned by the NPDA. And so we're not looking at specific like matches between rule we're not trying to completely divorce ourselves from the idea that regional variation is necessarily a bad thing. And because I know when the circuit was a lot bigger, regional variation was a real thing.
Okay.
I think Washburn University was the first university to implement flex time outside of the NPDA actually, getting on board with it.
Right.
And then it took a while for NPDA to adopt it, but then also all of the regional schools to adopt it. And one of the major, I guess, gripes at the national tournament is that schools that have their own regional variations don't feel represented enough in either coaching or judging to feel like they can be successful at national tournament. Whereas in the past, you would have a lot more regional variation because a lot more schools from a lot of different regions would show up and bring their judges that other schools had to adapt to. Now the problem is that we've siloed ourselves off to that only the schools that can hang, right? Well, I put that in scare quotes for a reason, but only the schools that can do the national circuit thing show up to the national tournament. And so now we've self-selected ourselves into being very fast and very technical, when the reality on the ground is that that's not what most regional circuits are like at all.
Okay.
From what I've heard. It just happens to be a self-selection thing at a handful of tournaments.
Okay.
Where everyone just kind of goes, actually, just kidding, spreading and rejecting the topics, fine.
Okay. Yeah, I was wondering about that because a lot of our episodes last season, when we were doing some tournament recaps, were just ending with final rounds where they're just rejecting the topic and having a framework debate. And so, if you just collected data on how often that happens, whether or not that's the it wins, but is that our goal as debaters or instructors of debate to have that one discussion over and over again?
I think it's much less a debater problem and much more a judging problem.
Okay. Yeah.
I think if we had judges that were willing to say no,
the
circuit might be a much better place.
Right.
I've kind of had a change of heart over the last, since we were last recording.
Right.
Like a major change of heart, a major change in view in how debate should happen. And it's a judging problem.
Yeah.
It's not just the students have the students are going to do what the students want to do. I don't think that we need to be punishing them for doing what they want to do. But I think that if judges are willing to actually have a spine for a second and say that I won't listen to KFs and I think that they are bad and vote against them.
Yeah.
I mean, that might solve some of the problem, right? The judges create the norms. The judges create the things that we see. And so it's okay to not like arguments and not vote for them. That's your impetus as a judge. You don't have to be tabula rasa.
Yeah. We should probably have a discussion about about judging philosophies, tabula rasa, and influence. That's a good topic. I think we should add that, because I also had a change of heart about how I describe my judging philosophy, and I don't know. I'm kind of toying with a universal audience type of good old classical Perlman, Ulbricht's Titeca type stuff. To be where it's more along the lines of if there was a room of 100 people that were I could choose whatever the sort of average intelligence level would be, but would a majority of them side with one side or the other, and that becomes more of the criteria I'm using for judging, rather than can I find it on the flow, is there a dropped next to it, what I mean? It's so I'm trying to work out those particular details, but I see what you're saying about it's the judges that really create the culture, or that at least they're a very significant influence on the culture, we'll just put it that way, what I mean? But those are also the coaches. They're usually a lot of the grad students that are out there doing it. And so, I think, and they're so sharp, but they also, don't have this perspective. Like, I mean, like talking as a mid-40s something person, you're thinking about back 20 years, looking at it, I'm like, oh wow, this is a very, very wide perspective that I didn't even know I didn't have it when I was 20 years ago or something like that. Okay. So what were the things that you're proposing at this business meeting? If you like, do you have if you're just going to distill it down?
Sure. So one of the things we want to bring back are like very similar to how Pi Kappa Delta does coaching awards. So we want to add coaching awards.
Okay.
So coach and critic of the year.
Oh.
Try to incentivize, right? Because the coaches put in a lot of work and they deserve to be recognized too.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's lacking is we only have one award for coaches.
Okay.
And it's the Distinguished Service Award, and it usually ends up going to a member of the executive committee, which, like, I love the executive committee, and I think that we all do a wonderful job. But we're also not the ones on the ground.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big one. And then other things we are adding is the novice round robin.
Got it. That's at the tournament. That's at the national tournament? Okay.
Yes, at the national tournament. So it would be not technically separate from the tournament, but like different format than the rest of the tournament, right? Very different than like the Swiss model. It's a round robin model.
Okay.
We are also going to add a counter proposal to that one.
Okay.
A JV division. So you can either pick novice round robin or a JV division.
Okay.
And so then it would just be a tournament that would be all novice and rookie people that want to show up, that is completely divorced from the open side of the tournament.
Got it. Okay.
And then the other big one for right now is we're going to add mandate value topics.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Controversially, we think this is, we're trying to do this as an attempt to limit the amount of KFs read.
Okay.
Because if we can give you a substantially philosophical enough value topic, it ends up being a critique anyways.
Right.
So if you can get them out of your system in the mandated value topic rounds, then maybe we stop rejecting the topic.
Yeah, I think there's ways to be topical and still critical. It just seems like a lot of people are like, like, I don't care about the topic. I do appreciate critical AFs, but I very much appreciate the topical critical AFs more than, what I mean? It's like just go for it. You know what I mean? You're bright, you're smart, you can do it, I'm sure, but I think that they do the math on the likelihood of this one winning versus that one winning in front of this critic, and I don't blame them for that calculus, but like you said, we got to change that calculus a little bit. The variables have to be a little bit different.
The more people that show up to the tournaments, the more judges they bring, and the wider diversity of voices and opinions that we hear, right? I mean, it's just a numbers game. And it is frustrating when you're a smaller school and you show up to this tournament and then get spread out of your round 4 and you never want to do this again. I get it. But if you brought 4 of your other friends, right, your school friends, to show up to the tournament with you, now the judging pool is a lot more diluted. 4 out of 16 is 1/4 of the judges now. Right. That you're now forcing the rest of the people to adapt to.
Right. Okay. Well, it's something to think about. Anyone attending tournaments, like bringing extra judges and with various philosophies, just like a judging philosophy discussion is a good idea. I think I'm motivated to add that to our season.
Yeah, I would love to have that discussion.
All right, cool. Oh, maybe we could even talk about it. In prepping for the first tournament. Oh hell, I didn't even think about that. That might be a good addition to that. Yeah. Okay. You know what? And that's what our next episode is going to be. We're going to be talking about how do you get ready for this first tournament. Kyle, thank you so much for giving us insight on what is happening in NPDA on all levels.
Thanks, Jared.
we'll be back again in the future, talk more about NPDA stuff. All right. See you, everybody.